Hello, my friends. Welcome to Word Made Digital. I'm your host, Joanna, and you're watching the YouTube version of the podcast. Week after week, we're coming at you with conversations with creatives and communicators all about how to communicate the best news in the world, but in the digital age. Thanks so much for watching, checking out this episode. If you want to know more, you want to check out more of our free resources, go to wordmadedigital.com or browse around this YouTube channel and you're definitely going to find some content that will help you. And of course, thank you so much to our sponsors, Compassion Canada and Wycliffe College are making this podcast possible. Enjoy the interview. Scott, welcome to the podcast, Scott the Painter. I'm so glad to have you. I have followed you for so long, and your art is it stops me, it strikes me, it moves me, which I think is what art is supposed to do. So I'm so glad to talk to you. And we're talking about Honest Advent, this work that you've done to do with Christmas and 25 readings for Advent, like leading up to Christmas. But before we get to that and we go Christmassy, let's jump back into what we were just talking about, which is the business of art. Have you been an artist your whole life?
Yes, I put a lot of intentionality into it at 25 and then vocationally at 27. So meaning I graduated college, I studied education and art. But after that, I worked for a bit. I went and lived in Europe for a year, attended a Bible school in Europe and backpacked. Came back, ended up substitute teaching, ended up teaching high school. But when I came back from Europe, I started applying myself to the practice of painting, meaning I had no classes or schedule. It just was like something I knew I needed to give time to. And then at 27, I just remember writing in my prep period on the board, and I just stopped and I was like, there's something else I'm being invited to. I'm not sure what that is, but something. And a long conversation with myself and the giver of my life led me to go, if I don't try to be an artist, whatever that means, I'll always regret it. I didn't know exactly what that meant. I just knew I wanted to try to do it. And so at 27, I left teaching and started pursuing art full time. Thankfully, I got married and I had a sugar mama for those first 4 years and the last few years, like it trades on and off, to give me time to develop and develop things. But for the last, in there, I worked for a church, a design agency, a nonprofit, but I've always kept this practice and occupation of being an artist. And it's been for the last 5 years, I've just been an independent artist, author, performing artist, all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, you took the leap. That's often the a lot of conversations we have here on Word Made Digital is this tension point of the thing you really would love to do with your life, but it doesn't yet make the money to justify doing it. But will it ever if you don't try?
Yeah,
If you
absolutely.
don't take a leap. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what we were just bantering about too was this idea of what I guess I'm just calling the business of art. That you're an artist, but learning how to do the business side is an entirely separate thing, which is why a lot of people are starving artists, because they are fantastic at creating, but have no idea how to sell it or position it in the world.
Yeah.
For anyone else. So what have you been learning about that, or what is your approach to that?
Yeah. I mean, I have 3 kids. So at last time I had to, like 5 years ago, I had to go, how do I make money? Like really think through the revenue streams of like, what do people want from me? What can I give them? And so I had to develop that. I have throughout my art career been a performing artist and like a painter for hire and painted live at events and stuff. So I did the like conference and church circuit for a while. And so developed a way of like, how do you become a traveling painter? How do you take gear across the country? And how do I started to figure out all those things. But then, a few years ago, I met a guy named Sean St. Peter, and he's got a pretty kicking Etsy shop. And I heard he was making like 25 grand a month on Etsy selling. He would take pictures of vintage kids' toys and like really nice photographs, and then he'd print them on canvases, and he kind of landed in the kids' decoration room, decorating rooms for children scene. And so he was doing really well. And he lived in the town I lived in. So we had lunch through a mutual friend, and he was telling me, he was like, oh, I'm trying some stuff out on Shopify and all this stuff. And I just, so then we'll come to this conversation, which is when you're an artist, you're given like limited ways of or ideas of what being an art is. But one of my friend, Kristen Cochran, great painter and teacher in Dallas, she says, she's like, I'll often get people be like, well, how do I make it in the art world? And she's like, well, what world do you mean? Because there's so many worlds in the art world that you could be like in the craft world. You could do the like selling paintings at a art fair world. There's getting into retail, all that kind of stuff. And so I just looked at what I did and was like, I'm making an immense amount of work. I usually, because was live painting a lot, I was like making something and then it wouldn't go anywhere. And so I was like, well, what if I could create like an online store that just kind of catalogs everything I've made, and then I can keep residually making that. Now, I knew I didn't want to have like a printer in my house and be printing stuff and then just like going to the post office all the time. So what was interesting about Shopify, and it backends to this third-party printer and shipper, is that it's all automated. So you just have to do the work, the back end work, which is a bit laborious, but once you get it set up, it just runs on its own. So it's a residual income, which is what Tim Ferriss says in 4-Hour Work Week is what you want to do. And I just said, I went into it going, I can't judge this on 1 month. I got to judge it on like 5 years. So just keep slowly building this thing. And it's been like 4 years, and now it's like half of my income. In fact, it's been saving my butt this pandemic.
Wow.
It's kind of been, that online store has been like some months the only way I've been making any income. So it was worth doing. So that's just like one aspect. The way that I think about my career is I go, okay, it's like 3 parts. I'm a visual artist. So I'm an illustrator, painter. So I make artworks for commission pieces, although I don't do any commissions right now, or make stuff for Instagram, online, and then it goes into my store, or odd jobs. Then I'm also an author, and I have my 3rd book that just came out. And then I'm a performance artist and a speaker. So then I speak and tour a show, which is also on pause right now. So I think of those 3 things.
As a sidebar to that, just by the way, as a sidebar to the show, I'm connected to Punchline Speakers, which is
nice. My agents,
and Holly and Joy and that whole crew that you work with on the speaker side. And so of course a lot of that has gone away with COVID. That was like a huge part of your performative artwork. Was these shows.
Oh yeah, when it started, it was just like, here's your schedule for the rest of the year being canceled. Yeah, I know. It was very sad. It is sad, but we'll make it.
How is, I mean, mental health and artists often is, the stereotype, and I think probably why artists do great art is because they feel a lot of feelings.
Yeah.
So how has the feeling train been for you in like a total change in your work outlook, just the calendar of activity for the year? What a crazy year.
There was a lot of despair and depression. Well, not only did that COVID happened, but we moved right in the middle of it, right at the beginning of it. Okay. So then we moved from Portland to Austin, and we have good friends here, but basically we moved to a city that's like mostly shut down. And so kind of all the great things about Austin don't exist, nor do we have a way of really connecting with it. So then you had to take away all your familiarities. So just a lot of comforts and familiarities have been taken away from myself, from my life. And that, I grieved that for months. And then, I'm grateful. I think the move is always to go, what is the conversation I can only have by being here? Because that helps you center in on how God's involved with your life, on what are the things that you've been neglecting, that the normal busyness of your life that you can easily just like pass over, that needs to spend some time developing. And I have been doing that stuff. So not only, I mean, also I got a book deal right before COVID. So I have Honest Advent came out, and then I'm working on Say Yes as a book that's coming out next year. So I do have stuff to do, but what I had to step back was a number of things. Was considering like I actually had to work on a lot of like heart stuff, and the way I would describe it is I needed to find the place from within myself to know how to stand from, and I'm trained as a high school teacher. I've been a high school teacher. I've been a college professor. I'm a spiritual director. And yet I still, at times, I'm uncomfortable with considering myself a teacher, specifically a spiritual teacher. And I had to like work through that stuff with my spiritual director and a therapist, and also just prayerfully to find a way find a firm place to stand, which I have, which I was like, oh, this is actually all part of the plan. Is a limiting word, but like this is the necessary work to prepare me for the things that are coming my way. And so I'm really grateful for that. And now I'm ready for this next season. I don't know. I have this real awareness, and just my like high and like strength finders. My highest strength is connectedness. So I've just been seeing all these things connecting, and I was like, oh, things are about to like next level for me. And I really need to know inwardly where I'm firmly planted in order to not just flake out on that next phase. So, so I'm grateful for that. And then also, I guess there's like some other things I've been developing, but I would say like that's what I've been doing with my time, is like paying attention to that other stuff. I also am lucky enough to be married to my wife Holly, who runs a blog called The Modern Proper that does really well as a business. So and throughout our marriage, we've had like seasons of giving and taking, where one person kind of like takes the lead and allows a respite for the other one. So I'm in like for the rest of the year, I'm fine, but I have a book to finish and some things to do, but like Holly's really jamming right now. So there is like I'm okay, like not having to do so much, and I have to take care of children too. So there's all that as well. But yeah.
Oh, sorry, just as a side note, where are they now? I mean, because I'm thinking of all this podcasting you're doing probably today. Where do the children go? Are you cordoned off in some corner with locking the
Yeah,
door so
no,
they can't see?
what you see is like, I have a studio in my backyard. So this
Okay.
converted garage space is my like art studio, and also a bit of an exercise room over there, and like like there's places for the kids to come in and like create and do things
Yeah.
like that. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
this is
Perfect.
my workspace.
So, would you consider yourself a Christian artist, or do you hate that term, Christian art?
I only hate it because it's known through a certain kind of bookstore or radio channel that does
Mhm.
not that I feel very off brand with. So I'm okay being I'm fine being labeled as an artist, and if I'm being labeled as a Christian or a Christ follower, uh, I just don't like the assumptions that come with that,
Huh.
because I would, and then there's probably labels like, well, he's a very progressive and left leaning, and then there's just like all those kinds of things. But like, I would, yeah, I just like my stuff won't ever appear in a Christian bookstore or
Mhm.
probably at a Christian arts thing. So like, but I'm okay being known as a Christian artist. I
And
just
would
don't.
you I know. I mean,
Yeah.
you're not precious moments, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not you're not Paramount painting, although I'd love your interpretation of that poem with the footprints in the sand. That'd be an
Oh
interest. I'd
gosh.
love to see your interpretation of that cheesy art that we all, if we've grown up in church, we all saw the art of the footprints
Yeah.
somehow with the
And
poem
Jesus
about
was
God
carrying me.
carrying
Yeah, there's
you or
only
something.
one. Yeah.
But in general, I'm curious. I ask, do you consider yourself a Christian artist? Because a lot of the work you do is faith based imagery.
Yeah.
Um,
The way that
but
I
maybe
describe it
from a
is
different angle.
I want to I want to give a symbol, I want to give a visual language to people's spiritual journeys. That's how I describe what I would do. So I want to give through kind of a symbol set or image depiction, um, these odd and interesting places or dynamics we find ourselves in. And I grew up Protestant, so there was like maybe three symbols, and even in the Catholic or Orthodox traditions, which have very robust kind of image culture and stuff like that, I love a lot of that, and it's influenced me. But I still think there hasn't been this updated contextualization of it, and so my stuff
Mhm.
is like trying to nod to the past, but go, hey, we've been through a pop culture revolution. We've been through graffiti. We've been through design. What would the stuff look like now? And then,
Like if
fight.
Michelangelo was painting a ceiling today, what might it look
Yeah,
like?
like it would be, that would be a fun project to do. That specifically would be really an interesting conversation because I think so I spent, after high school, I lived a year in France, and I lived 3 blocks from a cathedral, and I went there
Mhm.
every day. And that had a huge effect on me. And one of the things I would say is why our spaces, specifically in Western culture, our sacred spaces aren't very impressive is because we make sacred spaces for a teacher instead of making spaces as a teacher. So
Hmm.
why you'll love beautiful churches or cathedrals is because the building itself is the teacher. And yeah, they'll do a service and a priest will come up and like give a homily, but the space itself is the teacher. And now we only make our buildings for teachers. So they're just rooms with sound panels and there's no teaching. It's just like, well, we got to wait till we upload the pro presenter and get the band on the stage and then like a dynamic charismatic speaker, and then we'll have a teaching. You know what I'm saying? And that's a different thing. So if somebody was like paint the ceiling of that, that means they've bypassed all this kind of like where we've come from over the last decades and stuff of like what we think our sacred spaces are. I'd be very interested in making a sacred space as a teacher again. I don't have the money to do that, but like, like I don't think we should start building cathedrals again because that would cost us like $500 million. But like, I do think like, I do think like, uh, I think one of the things that's going to be very interesting about COVID is like what our gatherings and what our spaces look like on the other side. And yeah, anyways, that's a
Well, I
whole
mean,
other
it's
train of thought.
interesting even when you talk about we're not going to spend this amount of money on a building. I think there's this justice part of me that would agree at most levels. Like, yes, there's probably a better way for us to spend our money to, I don't know, solve major global hunger issues or something, and it's the pushback where Catholics and Protestants divided was there were many issues, but one of them, of course, was about the money and where it was going to fund these cathedrals on the backs of the poor.
Yeah.
However, we've gone so far the other way. Like, I think not just even in faith based art, but just in architecture in general. When I walk around my city here in Toronto, the old, beautiful buildings that would have taken a long time to build
Mm-hmm.
compared to these glass and steel structures that go up very, very high, very,
The
very
cement
quickly.
warehouses that just go and then yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
whether that's a
Mm-hmm.
church or just a condo or an office tower, they go up very quickly, but then you see the ornate detail and the ivy and the carvings in stone or just the different thought that went into artistry of just architecture, let alone church art or architecture. I guess it's maybe we've gone so far the other way. I'd love us to reimagine a church that did spend some money on
Yeah.
on the space being more beautiful, and
Yeah.
teaching.
Mhm. And I think because there is a danger in nonprofit work, which can just consider numbers and pragmaticism
Mm.
instead. And like, there has to be like also every major society has had sacred spaces. And so we need like I, like I live in Texas now, and there are plenty of like grossly large churches that are like a block from each other. Like, how many like $55 million buildings do you need? Like that are
Yeah.
on the same, about the same thing. Uh, so, but guess what? All of them are closed unless they're having a program or something. What's great about the Catholic Church is most of their buildings are open every day, because they're like, you can come and sit in the sanctuary and have a
Mhm.
time if you need that. A sanctuary, like, listen, it's a sanctuary. It's a place for you to get away. It's a place for you to be lifted up because of the high ceilings. It's a place for you to enter into the story, the historical story you're going on. That's why there's the historical story of through the scriptures is all around you. So you understand that you're part of this larger thing. And so the space is like a teacher, a reminder, a solace. And so like it would be awesome to have a strategy to go, what would it look like to have sacred sanctuaries for people to deal with their soul? Instead of like, hey, there's a big event happening this Friday and Saturday and
Mhm.
Sunday, and
Mhm.
the doors will be open, but then they shut and we keep them closed all week long. It's just that kind of, there
Mhm.
are churches that have reimagined their spaces and provided an open space, have made it multifunctional, put like food, pantry, coffee shop. There's a great, I worked at a church in Houston called Ecclesia that is like, well, it's closed now because of COVID, but like was a functioning like food, coffee shop, community center at all times. And yeah, they would have services every now and then. So there's a church in Salem Alliance, that basically was like, we don't need to make a large building for ourselves. Let's make a large building for the city. And so their new church building is like this multifaceted like community center that they built for the city that their church also uses. And so there are people with that kind of vision. Um, but yeah, the aesthetics also have to be in there too, because I think the pragmaticism of building can often like go, yeah, but what does the space do to you? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, and I think that's a question that's always interesting to get into.
Yeah, and I think of the time when I was communications director of a large church, and we specifically switched. We had this hot or not list of words to use, and
Yeah,
on the not list was the word sanctuary, and on the hot list was the word auditorium, because it wasn't a sanctuary.
yeah.
It was an auditorium, and first
Hmm.
of all, sanctuary felt like bird sanctuary, like, I don't know, like it was a word that we were trying to it wasn't a sanctuary, so we didn't want
Yeah,
to describe it that way. It
yeah,
wasn't sacred space in terms of, I mean, I suppose it was spiritually, but it wasn't visually giving that cue. It wasn't just sort of free for all, come and go as you like. I suppose people could have come, and every
yeah,
once in a while people did, but for the most part it wasn't used as a sanctuary. It
yeah,
was just used for, the event experience
yeah.
on weekends. But we're talking about sort of what's missing in church and visuals. Your latest work is about Advent,
Hmm.
Christmas. I suppose in some ways this work is something you've been doing for a long time, but it's just come out as a book called Honest Advent, and I'd love to get in your head even just like why this book, uh, why this collection of your work. What was missing from Christmas visually?
Well, it was, the genesis of it was around 4 years ago, where those of us who live in the United States find ourselves in a very similar time, which is right at the end of an exhausting and a divisive election cycle. Syria civil war was really devastating and displacing, and we were seeing images from that. There were multiple mass shootings, Zika Flint water crisis, kind of all of these really hard things. And it happens in lovely Canada as well, I'm sure. But like in November, the blanket of the dusting of Christmas decorations just descends on all of Western culture. And I remember walking into like a Target for something, and I was just like, oh yeah, Christmas time, and I just had this deep feeling. I was just like, man, I'm a fan of Christmas. I love Christmas. Here in the States, a lot of radio stations will become 24-hour Christmas music all the time. I'm one of those nerds who sets that on the memory dial of their car,
Oh yeah,
like
I
I'll
want
do
that
that.
too.
Yeah, I love it. But like that year, I just, in the context of all the devastation and misery we found ourselves in, I just found the brand of Christmas completely irrelevant to the world I found myself in. And not even just like the Santa story, which is fine. I'm just like, but how many more Santa movies do we need? But like, and how do they have all that technology in the North Pole? We should get some of that. But they like, also in my own Christian tradition, the imagery and the depictions just seemed like sanitized and safe and not really human at all. Like they felt void of like the world I found myself in. And for me, like I am married. I'm not a woman, but I'm married to one. I've seen 3 pregnancies and births up close. And as a witness to the female experience in birth, I just was like, birth is wonderful and amazing and sacred, but it's also like difficult and hard and transformational and painful and a lot of fluids, and it's very risky. And we were pregnant with our 3rd at that time, and I just like paid close attention to what was happening. And my thought was this, which was like, God incarnated into the world through human vulnerability. And if we're going to still find God in our midst now, it's along that same avenue, which is human vulnerability. And so I started looking at kind of the vulnerability of being incarnated, being human, being going through the pregnancy cycle. And it's all very shockingly weak and vulnerable, which religion doesn't like, because religion really likes to be powerful and on the winning side. And I grew up, and I'm a part of like, I'm not a part of it, but I grew up in, the superiority complex of Christianity, which is we're right, we're the winners, we're better than everybody else. And
we figured it out.
We figured it out. Got to get everybody over here because we're the right ones. And yet you constantly see in the incarnation of Jesus someone who keeps choosing humility and weakness. And so I started just these illustrations of like pregnant women with blood and just, nipples and boobs that weren't the same size. And because it wasn't trying to like, there's plenty of the objectifying of female bodies for sure. But I like live with a naked, I'm around a naked pregnant woman, and just, and her being like, "Ma, this boob's bigger than the other." That's what happens, and it's just, that's our life together. Yeah, real life. And so I was just like going, look at this, like what happens. Because here's what I learned from being around cathedrals and all the sacred work is that and I have a chapter in the book that's called Sacred, and it's specifically of this like nude pregnant woman who's like arching her back. Some people think it looks like she's giving birth that way, but it's actually just an image of my wife who woke up and her like just back would hurt. She's like, "Oh, my back hurts so bad." And because her body, certain times in pregnancy, your body hurts all the time. And I was like, the thing is like, what does it mean to make something sacred? It seems that what happens is like something otherworldly or something extra happened in our mundane world that transformed us. And so we want to remember that moment, and we want to pay homage to it. And we usually do that by glittering it up, putting some gold leaf on it and all of that. And that makes sense. I think that's an honoring process, or process, as you say in Canada. But like what happens in that is that slow process of making something sacred. It's the slow baby steps of saying to yourself that only happens to other perfect people and not to ordinary, smelly, pubic hair ridden cellulite bodies like mine. And actually all sacred moments come through our human biology. They happen through human lives. And so I go like, look, no, like nobody wants to see, like they crucified Jesus naked, but nobody wants to walk into a sacred space and see the like wedding tackle of the King of Kings. Like I get it. That's, it's reverence that makes us put on that loincloth. But we need to realize and always keep in mind that that's an editorializing, because the goal of crucifixion was not only slow death, but also shame. And so like we too, even though we have these like sanitized sacred stories of nativity and stuff, must realize those aren't editorializing too. I guess I wanted just to counteract. I wanted to like, what my intention was like, I just as a designer, as an artist, I'm like, there is a massive brand of Christmas. Like there is like, and if you've grown up in it, you don't even think of it as a brand. You're like, this is Christmas. But if you travel, if you go to another country, the best thing in the world is to go to a country that doesn't celebrate Christmas. Like that's like Thailand, that's a Buddhist country, like they don't, because then you're like, oh, this is just a thing I grew up with. Like I was on a podcast with a guy from New Zealand, and he's like, yeah, because I was like, the brand of Christmas is like winter and it's cold and stockings. And he's like, the Southern Hemisphere, it is summertime. Christmas for us every year is like, like 35 degrees and palm trees, and it's hot out. But he's like, still, we'll put evergreen trees in our living room and we'll hang fake icicles on. And he's like, actually recently, like a lot of people in New Zealand are like, this is dumb. Like it's summertime here. It's not winter. Why? And we're doing winter because that's coming from North America or Europe. And so I wanted to, that's why that book that you have my goal was to make it look nothing like the Christmas brand. I just was like, I don't want this to look like Christmas at all, because I just want to sidestep this juggernaut of a brand and go, what is this story outside of this brand that's been invented by marketing and consuming firms? But what is happening here? What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be incarnate? What is it, because Jesus partook in becoming human and becoming visible, and we have to do the same thing. We don't get any choice in coming into the world. We appear in a family, we appear in a body we didn't get to choose, with genes that we didn't get any choice in. And the choice to us is every day is to take the risk of being seen and participating in life, and to choosing to love and to forgive. And Christ emulated that. And so I wanted to like look at Jesus partaking in human vulnerability that lets us find the divine amidst our own human vulnerability. And so that's where that book came from. And I think it was necessary, because I think we're find ourselves in a very similar moment, which is an exhaustive, at least in the United States, an exhaustive elective cycle, a global pandemic, racial unrest, a lot of reckoning, and a lot of vulnerabilities that we don't feel comfortable with. And I think we can find the incarnate Christ right there in the midst of all of that.
Wow. I mean, there's this idea that you say that you think that you have another phrase you think we should say instead of Merry Christmas.
Yeah, it's be not afraid. I said be not afraid could be a legit substitute for Merry Christmas, because all the angelic announcements started with be not afraid. And
not happy birthday. I mean, essentially,
not
Merry
happy
Christmas
birthday.
is happy birthday of Christ.
It's happy birthday of Jesus, yeah, for sure. But be not afraid. That specific meditation, I talk about the angels appearing. It says the glory of the Lord shone around them, and like where what we probably have in our heads is like this robust laser light show, with a lot of lights and sounds and stuff like that. But that's mostly been given to us by television or movies, or maybe even paintings, but not really scripture. It just says like the glory of the Lord shone around them. So it infers light, but was like, I think the glory of the Lord is about weightiness and reverence. Um, and I give an example is like, if you were swimming in the ocean and like a whale came by you, you would give reverence because of the weight of its immensity. Its immensity would reveal your fragility, and you would have to give honor to it because you would be aware of that weight. And so it's like, besides the laser light show that's happening, is like maybe the glory of the Lord and the weightiness of that moment was going, God's actually real. Like this spiritual realm is a reality that has been hidden to me my whole life, to these people who find themselves in this story. And like, actually all of my assumptions about everything have fallen apart. And like, now I'm left in the ashes of my limiting conclusions about what life is, about what I am capable of being a part of, about what God's doing in the midst of it. And so that specific meditation is to, if you follow the 25 days, is day 25. So it happens Christmas morning. And I was like, the place historically that God incarnates something new in our life is, it has to, like, God starts with our fears, because our fears are our worries and our anxieties about limited conclusions about our lives. And that's where, if an announcement that everything could be different, that things are going to change, that there's going to be something new, it's going to have to confront those fears first. So I think Merry Christmas could be substituted with Be Not Afraid. Like, is that seems to be the start of the conversation, is don't be afraid.
Beautiful. Yeah. And he says it to us over and over.
Yep.
By he, I mean God, to the people.
Mm-hmm.
And we continue to forget it over and over. But yeah,
Yeah.
especially in this anxious time, in an anxious year, we're coming up to an anxious Christmas where, in many places of the world, who celebrate Christmas, you can't get together in the ways you would want to this year.
Yeah.
Governments are advising in many places to not have the big parties or the
Yep.
big, even just the family. In some places, whole, larger family gatherings are not. It's just an anxious time.
Yeah.
Um, do you find creating art? Because it's also business for you, is it something that helps you reduce anxiety, or is art often a place where you confront anxiety?
Yeah.
Or
Art,
fear, maybe,
the creative
more.
process is my way of understanding the world, and processing through the mystery that we all find ourselves in. So it is my like examination, processing, prayer, response. It's all of those things. So in fact, a lot of what is on Instagram in my account is like my own working it out. It is my own, like, what do I do with this despair? And like praying, thinking, meditating, hoping, working through that, and giving myself some kind of visual anchor that I can keep that in mind, or solidify that in me. And then when I do that work in it, and I find that it becomes an avenue for connection and therapy and relief and all of that, then I offer it to a larger audience and go, this worked for me, maybe it'll work for you. And that is a lot of like what I do. That's like there's like a therapeutic part of my life that like knows that art making is part of that. And then there's also like a problem solving that I think that I'm trying to do with my visualizations. So giving ways of working through different ideas. Like, what are some ones I'm working on now? I'm trying to like visualize, like on my list of to-dos is like I want to visualize the Lord's Prayer. So make it a series of images that coincides with the words. I want to, I shouldn't reveal this one. I'm trying to create like how Stations of the Cross is before Easter. I'm thinking of a Stations of Resurrection on the other side of Easter. And so I'm working through those stations to see like what was Jesus resurrecting on the other side, and is still resurrecting. And so giving like an icon or image set for that to like, because then it's like, well, because here, look, Joe, this is my frustration with a lot of religion, is like, not a lot of religion. My frustration is just like, I find Easter very disappointing. Like Easter is, if you work at a church, Easter's like, he's risen. But if you really went into, like, let's be honest, if you go to everybody in that audience and go, he's risen, and just be like, what the hell does that mean to you? Like, I do think there are people in that congregation who have robust spiritual lives, and they're like, I interact with the living Christ. He's risen. He has been risen. I've known this resurrected Christ. But I think a lot of people will be like, I don't really know. I just know we're supposed to clap and we're supposed to hand out flowers to people. And it's just like our holiday. And, like it's like, he's risen. I still got to pay my taxes next week. It's like, well, who gives a crap that he's risen? like that's like, what is he rising for? And there is a strand of religion that's like, well, when you die, you don't really die. And you're like, great, that's it? Is that all he's risen for? So like, when I die, like everybody else who's ever lived, I'm not really dead, but I have no idea what that is, and nor am I in control of it. Great. Well, what about now in this life? Like the life that I have to live, average 80 years, maybe less, maybe more. What does rising mean now? And it's hard to find it. Often I feel like the Easter sermon doesn't hit that. You know what I'm saying? Like, what is Christ resurrecting now? What's being resurrected in us? And I often think that Easter is just like a big, like, we win party versus like, we went through death. What are we free now to resurrect into? And that's why I think like Good Friday is important and Silent Saturday is important, because then humble Easter is just like standing outside the grave of your once dead life going, well, what's possible now?
Wow.
And that is what we're invited to do every day. And so like, I want, like, my deepest desire is to find the living Christ now in our lives right now. And as a spiritual director and as a person who teaches on prayer, like the pivot for like spirituality is not about getting God's attention. Spirituality is about awakening to the work and voice of God already in your life, already in everybody's life. We don't need missionaries to go to other countries and be like, you don't know God. You don't know God. No, learn about our God. We need to go to other countries and be like, God is somewhere in your midst. Can I help you find? Let's talk about where that is. Because God is already involved in and that's a different place to start from. And we could tangent on that if you want to, but maybe we should come back to art.
Which is what we always hope. Which is what we always hope art will do. That it comes alongside of us. It surprises us. It moves us. In a way that's less good art. I would say whatever I define as good art, less aggressive for the wrong reasons. That it confronts something in us because it moves us to something, rather than saying this art is right and you are wrong. It stirs something in our humanity.
I say it's like, it's an excavation tool. It's pulling out our deepest thoughts, feelings about the life we find ourselves in. Like a great song that you hear that causes you to stop and weep. Why? It's because the artist somehow sonically and lyrically perfectly depicted what it feels like to be in your skin.
Mm.
Maybe in a way, actually, mostly in a way that you hadn't got in touch with. And so when you come across a film or a piece of visual art or a song or even like an amazing, like people often dismiss food, but I'm like, until you've had a meal that made you cry, you won't understand what I'm talking about. But like some kind of created thing that excavates this deep, like it's your soul. It's this, the depth of your life. Your soul is the depth of your being.
Mm.
And it excavates and lets you see that for a second. And you're like, oh, there's the depth of my life. And usually it brings you to tears or some kind of euphoria because you're like, there is the essence of what it is to be alive. And that is one of the wonderful functions that art can do. And that's why we have it. And that's why people do it, because they're trying to like, we're trying to go, what is this thing we find ourselves in, this mystery of being here? And I think coming back to the book, like Jesus, the story of God is not like, can't wait for you all to get off earth. You know, like this, like this 14th century
Yeah.
mystic.
Hope you can get out of here soon. It
Yeah,
sucks.
Meister Eckhart said, if God wanted us to be in heaven, he would have never created the earth. So like, this is where we're supposed to be. This life, this existence. This is where the finite meets the infinite. And so Christ incarnating is honoring and giving, saying like, being human's good. Being human's good. And I'm participating with that. I want you to participate with that. Yeah. And that means a lot for someone like me and others who have had real bouts of depression and suicidal ideation, because I think there's a real, and I have work about that as well, which is like, life is a miracle, but what happens when you don't want that miracle? And I do think like, I love the way that I grew up and a lot of the people who taught me the faith I have, but there was this like focus on like afterlife. It just was all about afterlife. And what it was saying is like, this life really sucks. And I started to understand like, actually, a lot of the people at the churches I were at were just a bunch of people who hated their lives and couldn't wait. They hated their existence.
And maybe they built them that way.
Yeah. And so they just,
because they weren't striving for anything
yeah,
more.
they hated their
Yeah.
lives. They hated life. They hate the earth, and they just can't wait to get off of it,
Wow.
out of
Yeah.
it. And that doesn't seem Christian at all. So, yeah,
Well, not when, Christmas is this declaration that flesh matters, fleshiness, earth, being here and now with people is profound.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Scott, it's Christmas. I love this.
We got into all the things.
Be
We
not
got
afraid.
deep.
I love
Yeah, there
that.
we
Be
go.
not
Yeah,
afraid.
be not afraid.
Be not afraid.
Yep.
That sounds like an anthem, a greeting I want to use more in 2020's Christmas season. Be not
Yeah,
afraid.
me too.
Scott, where do people find you? Where do you want to point people to your work, and especially tell people where to buy your stuff instead of stealing it from the internet?
Yeah, that's fine. Or it's not fine. Don't steal it. But yeah, the newest book is out now, available everywhere books are sold, and you can find that on platforms like Amazon and stuff. But if you want to buy from local bookstores, I have a website called honestadvent.com. Just the title of the book, and there's a button right there at the beginning that will let you buy from local bookstores, and that's a great thing to do because our local bookstores are such a gift. So there's that, and I have all kind of arts and meditations and stuff to go with that for your church communities this year. I am most engaged on Instagram, and I am Scott the Painter on Instagram and all social media. And my website is scottericksonart.com. And yeah, I have a great gallery of work that you can hang in your homes, because most of you don't have art on your walls, and you should. So I have some good stuff for that, and stuff that speaks to your own journey. And that's where I'm at online. And then when traveling starts again, I'll post where I'm coming. I'm hoping to come to Toronto and Hamilton. There's all this talk.
Yeah, we want to
I
have
know
you if
it was in
the
the
border
works.
was
We were working
open.
on it in the spring, and then
I
everything just got
know, I
shut down. But
know. I was involved in some of that conversation about getting you here, but maybe
maybe
2021, man.
2021. We'll see how things go.
Hey, Scott, it's so great to meet you and to chat.
Thanks, Joanna. It's been great talking. Yeah.
Um, you're a well of insight, and we see that through your work, but just see that too in this conversation. So I do want people to get this. If people are feeling not very Christmassy, or they just want to change the way they do Christmas, I would love. I'm going to be going through this book through the month. I want people to join me. Honest Advent, grab the book, and and we'll do it.
We'll
We'll
do
do
it.
Christmas Not
That's
Afraid
right.
this year.
That's right. That's right.